And now, ladies and gentlemen, join us on the Chop It Dive. We have Stacy Rost. Stacy covers, like I said, Seattle Seahawks for ESPN 710 in Seattle as a writer and the host of the Jake and Stacy show. It is important to note, too, that we, along with everyone watching live, are in the presence of greatness. Stacy once took home a trophy for what, the Bold Lake Elementary stockbroking contest. So
yes, can you hear me okay, by the way?
Absolutely. So I figured, we had to put your accolades out there.
Thank you.
Let the people know who we
Rightfully
dealing with right now. Stacy, how you doing tonight? I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk. I would like to tell everyone, with the time difference, I am still at work. Secondly, this blazer looks gigantic. I would just like you to know that's the angle. In person, the fit is phenomenal.
I respect that. You had to let people know something right quick. Absolutely. So look, we are where we are because there's been a lot of rumors and smoke about Russell Wilson being ready to move on from Seattle. A couple weeks ago, Ian Rappaport reported that Russ wants to, quote unquote, explore his options. I guess we can start off from a macro level, Stacy. Just how did we get here with Russ? So I would just hand it over to you. How would you describe the Seahawks' current situation with Russell Wilson?
Uncertain, if I were to use one word, just uncertain. And I know that there are people that say, oh, there's nothing to this. Russell Wilson says, go Hawks still to end every press conference. And John Schneider and Pete Carroll kind of shot those rumors down. But I think that if enough people that cover this team closely, myself included, but plenty of other reporters, feel that they aren't sure, then I don't think it's been cleared up very carefully. So I think that if there's a specific moment, it's probably Russell Wilson sitting at the Super Bowl, having won the Walter Payton Man of the Year. He's sitting with Roger Goodell, and he's looking miserable. Like, if you guys remember the moment, he's like looking at the field and he's just slumped down. You can just see he's like so mad that he's not there, and he's not playing. And he's probably thinking in this moment, like, I could be in a Super Bowl, and what has led me to this point where I haven't been back since I was 24 or so, 25. And that same year, following that interaction, Russell was on with Dan Patrick. The comments start. So that's like the catalyst for it. If there's a specific point, I would guess that it's just kind of Russell Wilson's profile growing. And as it grows, I would imagine he's looking around at the protection, specifically offensive line investments that other teams have made, and doing a lot of comparison. So there's probably been some comparing that's been going on for a couple seasons here. But the catalyst really, I think, was that moment at the Super Bowl, and then the interview that followed with Dan Patrick, and it kicked off a year now of speculation.
Now, you touched on it slightly, the offensive line. Stacey, for years, the discussion when it came to Seattle's offense was just the revolving or the lack of talent around the offensive line unit. And then when you point to a team as a whole, the concern over the offensive staff, specifically the coordinators. I'm not too sure about assistants or anything, but I know the coordinators have always been different. The defense has regressed from a talent standpoint. Obviously, you still have the key call. You had KJ Wright for a long period of time, and obviously Wagner as well. He's still always been around. However, from a progression standpoint of talent and also being unable to replenish through the draft, Dakota, I'm gonna need you to relax. I'm doing something right now. Yeah. How frustrating has it been for a person invested in the team? Obviously, you're covering it, but how frustrating has it been from that standpoint? And do you think that Russell has had that moment or those considerations at the top of his list, not just the offensive line, but just the team's direction in general?
Absolutely. And here's what's interesting about it is, like, you can kind of make arguments for either side. If you're John Schneider, you're listening to Russell Wilson complain about talent acquisition and saying, well, I mean, we paid you starting in 2015 and we just paid you again in 2019. And when you eat up that much of a salary cap, it's going to be really tricky. Oh, also, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the three other teams in our division have used high first round picks, which we haven't had because we've been winning for 10 years. So there's an argument to be made kind of defending some of your missteps, or rather your lack of opportunity at those prime picks, or the lack of total cap space. But But at the same time, you've had picks to trade, and those trades have failed. You brought in Jimmy Graham. That trade didn't work, in part because when you brought him in, you didn't use him the way he was used in New Orleans. You used him as a blocking tight end, which is weird because he was never good
Right.
at that and never great. And even then, after the first year of being like, maybe he isn't so good, let's run it back. Let's try the exact same thing next year. Like, they didn't figure it out until his final season, at which point Jimmy Graham was probably like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And you've had Percy Harvin. That obviously didn't work out. Jamal Adams, which is like a TBD moment. So those are all first-round picks, if you think about it. And you traded them all to two players who didn't work out long-term, and one player that is like, you're not so sure if he's going to work out or his fit for you. So I think I tend to side, if there is a side to take, with the idea that the struggles with the draft and misses in free agency are contributing more to Seattle's struggles. The personnel is contributing more to the struggles than is Russell Wilson taking up a lot of cap space or the Seahawks just not having a top 5 pick.
Yeah, and I'll chime in real quick, and I agree with you as far as like John Snyder and Pete Carroll. They've had a lot of misses in the draft, and I guess maybe even for Russell Wilson, what's made a big impact on him and seeing the trajectory of the team and like really what does the future hold when you give up 2 first-round picks for a strong safety that plays in the box. Is that really a game changer that's gonna help us move to the next level? And we're in the division with the Cardinals, the Rams, and the 49ers. So just me outside looking in, if I'm Russell Wilson, I'm like, there's no money to attract free agents. There is no draft capital to get in playmakers here to get me a better, I don't know, maybe a better running back. I can't really say offensive line for sure because I've heard in Seattle a lot that a lot of people complain that Russell holds on to the ball a lot, way too long in the pocket. They're saying that it's not really the offensive line; it's more so he just holds on to the ball forever. So eventually he's going to get hit or sacked. But it's just like for Russell, how can you really see this playing out when you want to get to the promised land of the Super Bowl, like you described that feeling you had with Roger Goodell at Super Bowl? Like that roster is not equipped to go and compete to even win the division.
Well, and first of all, players should always get their money. So anytime people are like, he should take less, it's like, who all has done that? I mean, this is the market. If that's the salary that quarterbacks are getting, who wouldn't sign that deal?
And it's only one quarterback who ever does it.
Yes.
It's only one quarterback.
And if you're just hypothetically, if you're Russell Wilson and you're like, this team has not been able to get the talent nearly close to the talent it had in 2013. If I shave off $10 million from my salary, what are you going to use it on? Like a tight end that isn't great? I mean, like what are you spending this money on that makes me think like, yes, that's the guy. They're going to make a move and they're going to go out and, like, let's say hypothetically that like some insanely talented in a year or two defensive end was hitting free agency. It wouldn't have to be an offensive lineman, but like I think you'd want to feel, if you're taking money off, that like it's being put towards something that's actually going to help the team and not trying to split it among 10 offensive linemen to compete for backup roles.
So one of the reasons why I definitely wanted to have you on, I love your conviction when it comes to Russ itself. There were some tweets, and I think I saw a video clip as well when you were speaking on Russ. And before we get into his actual skill set, you had tweeted out recently that essentially nobody's defending Russell Wilson's play. Obviously, this was during the season, but nobody's defending Russell Wilson's play as a factor in Seattle's struggle. He's been inconsistent at best, but two things can be true here. Wilson is struggling, and moving on from him would be a huge mistake. I mean, obviously, from the surface level, we see what it is, but can you provide context into us, how you felt when you tweeted that and why Seattle would be making a mistake if they moved on?
So the second part is just an easier answer, so I'll start. But it's just the sentiment here in Seattle, and maybe it's because I'm in sports radio, so I see a lot of feedback from people that are regular sports listeners. So they're like, shouting off with opinions about how they feel about it. I would say, in my experience, like 70% negative about Russell Wilson, and I think that
70. Oh my goodness.
It's a surprising amount that caught me off guard. But just a lot of the sentiment I see from fans is like, this guy is horrible now. He's not the same. He's basically Jared Goff. Get rid of him. And I think that the reality is not every team can have Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady or what have you. And this idea that if you move on from Russell Wilson, who even if this last season and the half season prior were a true mark of regression for him, not just a down year, but truly he's regressing, you can probably still win a Super Bowl with that version of Russell Wilson if you get some more talent around you, right? Like there's a best 3 quarterbacks ever. And then there's guys that are just good enough that you can win with because they have enough talent there. And I think that what I'm seeing from a lot of fans is this idea that like Russell Wilson is too flawed and not good enough anymore to win at all. And I just think that's factually incorrect. Like, I think that there's complete nuance missing from that both things can be true. Your quarterback can have genuinely regressed and not be maybe even like a top 5 quarterback. Who knows? And also he's the best option you're going to get, because who are you going to get in the draft with a poor quarterback class? Who are you going to find in free agency that's better than him? And if you trade, you're kind of back where you were. Like, what are you going to do? Trade for Aaron Rodgers, who has a greater cap hit next year? Like, it's just, you're out of options that are better. And so I don't really get what people think moving on with him will solve.
Absolutely. First off, Amani, I appreciate the resubscription on Twitch, man. I appreciate you rocking us. It's been a little minute. Yeah, 5 months it tells me, man. I appreciate you. I hope all is well with you. Okay. So actually, one more thing. You mentioned the injury. Just we could be quick on this one, but can you shed light into the actual injury and just how it meshed with his production? Do you think that he may have came back too soon, or is this something where it was just a rocky season for him just to begin with, and it just didn't stop?
He absolutely came back too soon, 1,000%. Like he looked horrible against Green Bay, and at that point, it just they'd already, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. If you take him out now, you're benching him, and that's the narrative. So they just continue to roll with it. He suffered a torn, ruptured tendon, and then several fractures in his finger, and should have been out probably minimum.
Awful.
I know, should have been out minimum 8 weeks. Was basically out half of that. Did not look the same when he came back. There was just like watching it in person. There was just a couple throws that didn't have the same zip, first of all. And then they'd be like weirdly off target for throws that 10 out of 10 times he would have made. So the accuracy was an issue, and just getting enough zip was an issue. And that, I would say, by the end of the season, I noticed a difference in that stuff not being there anymore. So I do think genuinely by the end of the season, he was significantly healthier than he was when he came out against Green Bay. But as far as for the issues prior to that, some of them did pop back up. Like you mentioned, him hanging onto the ball, that's still an issue. Like, didn't really change. And just some questionable decision making sometimes. Like, he's had some pretty ugly picks this year and last that feel new for him.
If I'm not mistaken, this was his first year with the new coordinator, right? Offensive coordinator?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one of my questions, which I thought was like pretty weird, with you being in the Seattle market and working, so closely with the team, how did you and the rest of your peers feel when news leaked of his agent, I guess telling Adam Schefter of these 5 teams that he would be interested in, such as the Bears, Cowboys, Raiders, and all those teams have quarterbacks or now have quarterbacks. But was that not a weird situation where the agent of the player is mentioning other teams that they're interested in going to during, like, I think it was like maybe 2 months away from training camp.
Yeah.
That was like the first time I've ever seen anything of that nature before, but I'm just curious to how the market took to that news.
Yeah, I think his agent, Mark Rogers, is kind of messy, but that kind of makes him a good agent for Russell. So what makes him a great agent for Russell Wilson probably drives the team crazy, I would imagine. And hey, he got him at the time like the richest contract in the NFL. But so at the time, I think it was this article came out in The Athletic. And they listed 4 teams, and the Miami Dolphins and I think the Jets were 2 of the 4 teams listed. And that was from Mike Sando and Michael Sean Dugar. And I think that what happened is Russell Wilson, his agent, saw that article and was like, I'm going to come out and correct these 4 teams because there's no way Russell Wilson would be willing to go to the Dolphins and Jets. Would I have done that? Absolutely not. There's a 0% chance I would have done that. But he did. And the weirdest thing to come out of that, and I'm not sure if you guys experience this, is like there's such a general distrust with media sometimes that we'd have people texting in like, Russ never put this out there, or like where you guys are making up these rumors about Russ being willing to go to teams. And it's like, no, it's from his agent. I don't know why he did it, but it's from his agent.
We in Washington, D.C., they have 90% of the fan base don't trust nothing to talking about.
We had a fight at this has nothing to do with Russell Wilson. I'll be quick. We had a fight at a training camp once with between Frank Clark and Jermaine Ifedi. And a friend, my friend's brother-in-law was talking to her about it. And he was like, well, you can't believe what you read. And I was like, I was there. And
you was there.
You can't believe what you read. It happened. It's wild.
So I think in terms of skill set, first of all, what's going on, O? And Kev, my bad, I miss you in the chat too. So in terms of skill set, you've been watching him day in and day out for some time now.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned some of his new picks are actually new. And I like that description because, I mean, it just highlights something that it popped up on your radar, but you don't know, like, you can't identify it just yet, what the flaw is. What are some of his strengths and weaknesses, just as you've seen him on a day in and day out basis? Obviously, the weakness, one of them you did mention, is holding on to the ball too long, but the floor is yours. And just in terms of other things that you noticed, the good and the bad of Russell Wilson.
Yeah, so the good is, I think, best deep ball passer in the league. It's beautiful. Seeing it in person is even more beautiful. It's one of those things where you're like, I heard someone else describing it this way, and I forget who was talking about it, but it was like, yeah, that's the thing. It's like you see it and you think that's going to be a catch, like when it's midair, because it's just so perfect. He's great with play action, and I don't think they do it enough. Like there's things that he is great with that they just don't use enough. Like I think he can still be pretty mobile, even though he's 33. They just don't work it in as much, and it's kind of weird. He struggles throwing over the middle of the field, which is very obvious. Like it's not been what he's done over the course of his career. And then combine that with the fact that he's shorter, and you have kind of like a twofold reasoning for that problem. But he's struggled there. I think not anything to do with play, but one thing that you've seen from him this year, certainly late last year, is normally he is a very conservative passer, and he's in a very conservative offense. Pete Carroll's a very conservative coach, and that's transitioned to Russell Wilson. I think you saw a lot of pressing from him. And normally you'd see that from players like earlier in their career, right? Like just making dumb decisions. I think he was so conservative early in his career that once the reins of the offense at the beginning of last year were given to Russell Wilson, you saw him start to press a little bit, and you saw the offense just not actually be too complex. Like they were depending so much on like throw it up to DK, throw it up to Tyler down the field, and let's hope we win. And they were averaging 34 points per game. It was amazing. And then defenses were like, oh, you can't run the ball? Great. Like, we'll just show you 2 high looks every single time. And it was a problem for them. You saw that a little bit with like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs this year. And then the Chiefs leaned into the run, and Seattle just couldn't. No one was healthy. So the one narrative that I think is a little tired with him is that he's a quarterback who needs a running back. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, the best offenses are going to be able to beat you with both, but I do think he performs well with play action, so that kind of lends itself to it.
All right, so I got one more question, and I'll hand it over to AJ for anything. You actually helped me out because it was a transition. At this point, obviously, you saw it. We all saw it. But Ryan Clark has said, I think it's yesterday now, if not 2 days ago, that let me actually pull it up so I can get the quote right from Ryan Clark. He had mentioned All right, here we go. Russell Wilson is not an all-time great quarterback. He's never going to be in those conversations. We have to stop putting him in that world that any team that has Russell Wilson can win a Super Bowl. Now, Russ is 1-4 in his last playoff appearances. And when it comes to Washington fans, most Washington fans like to believe that this team is a quarterback away from competing for championships. And as we look at Russ and as we look at A-Rod, who both have actually struggled in the playoffs in their most recent careers, is Washington, in your opinion, I mean, obviously in this question, you're the outsider looking in, but is Washington competing for a Super Bowl if they acquire Russ, or do they need a little bit more behind Russ to have a legit shot?
I'm more familiar with your guys' defense than your offensive weapons. I would say in general, like maybe an additional offensive weapon would help. But yeah, I think that that adding him absolutely makes you an immediate contender. And as far as like Ryan Clark's point goes, I don't think he's that wrong. Like I think
hey AJ, I swear I told AJ, I was like, man, he made me think, because I was like, I don't know if there's many quarterbacks out there who, like, when you have that conversation, that Russ automatically pops up, like in terms of all-time greats.
Yes.
But like, trust me, in this moment, in this era, he's a winner. But
Yes.
all-time great is a little bit different for me. That's kind of, I was like, you know what? I don't think he's completely wrong. He has something that had me thinking. So
the one thing I'll say is that with Ryan Clark kind of predicting it and being like, he'll never be that guy. Like, if Russell Wilson can get back to Super Bowls and win with a good team, then like you kind of, join that conversation. But as far as like the limitations he has, like quarterbacks are just insane. I found myself watching the AFC Championship, obviously, so did you guys and everyone else, and just thinking like, I don't know if Russ could hang with these two. And I think Russ is a stellar quarterback. He is the best quarterback this franchise has had. It's not close. He's one of the most talented athletes this city has had. And all of that being said, I was watching Mahomes, watching Allen, and thinking like, these guys are just on a different planet. And so if you're talking about all-time greats, no, like Russ isn't part of it. If you're talking about, could he take a team like Washington to a Super Bowl? Yeah, I mean, like, add as much talent as possible, specifically like some nice offensive weapons. You've got great pieces on defense. I don't see why not.
Yeah, I don't know. I see Russell Wilson as an elite quarterback. He just hasn't been provided the tools to show off, like maybe like a Mahomes or Josh Allen. Like I don't really know of him having a true number one wide receiver. Tyler Lockett is pretty solid. DK Metcalf, I think a lot of things are blown out of proportion because of his size, his speed, and possibly running down Buda Baker. But I don't see him as a complete wide receiver. Like I don't see a guy that's out there running a full route tree. And you can see that this year, like he struggled big time, and that's exactly the reason why he kind of dropped in the draft coming out of Ole Miss. But I just don't see Russell having tools that we could reference to. Like Mahomes is playing with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. I don't know if Russell Wilson ever really playing with a great tight end. Like you said, they brought in Jimmy Graham and had him doing the thing that he does the worst overall, which is block. So it's just like it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to talk about these guys, now in this early stage, and I think we look over the fact that Seattle also had a great defense. That was one of the more dominating defenses of all time in the NFL history. But Russell has never really played with elite talent on the side of the ball as him. Like, never played with a top 10 wide receiver, never played with a top 10 tight end. He's never had a top offensive line unit or even an individual player. So, he had Marshawn, but we know what happened with that. 1 yard to go to win the game, the Super Bowl. But outside of that, I think he's an elite quarterback. I just think Ryan Clark is a hater in regards to Russell Wilson. And I know Ryan, but like the comments lately have just been kind of out of pocket. And even me and Maul were talking about it earlier today. I watched the interview that Fred Taylor, Channing Crowder, Ryan Clark just recently did with Marshawn Lynch on Pivot. And he mentioned something about Russell Wilson's personality once again feeling like it was fraud. Like, and I'm just like, oh, maybe he just has a personal, gripe with him. But I think he's an elite quarterback. I just think he hasn't had all the ingredients that you would probably like. And I think Russell understands that too. That's why he's jealous of other guys' positioning, because he's like, when the hell am I going to get my Tyreek Hill, my Mike Evans, my Chris Godwin, or my Rob Gronkowski,
right?
or whatever the case is. I'm just stuck here in Seattle, like.
Or like my
we
Andy Reid, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's the other thing about, and this is why I love this conversation. And I feel like fans here are getting really tired of it because they don't want to constantly hear rumors about Russell Wilson being traded. I think it opens up conversations about, like, what's a quarterback mean for a franchise? What makes a quarterback elite? What makes him good? What makes him great? What's the recipe for a Super Bowl team? All these fascinating conversations that we could talk about endlessly. And I love that point because it's one where I get stumped. And I kind of think, like, I mean, how much of what makes a great quarterback is the environment into which he enters the NFL? And Russell Wilson entered with an historically great defense, Marshawn Lynch, but he's also spent his entire career playing under a defensive-minded head coach who's very conservative. They haven't ever had, like, great offensive coordinators who are incredibly creative. They play a very particular brand of football, and they've stuck with it even as Russell Wilson has continued to evolve and develop as a passer. I think it's one of the reasons he was labeled with the mobile quarterback thing much longer after he had already become, like, a pretty good pocket passer. So it is a good it's a fascinating point because having watched him his entire career, even I don't know. Like, I genuinely think, like, it's not that a part of me wants to see him traded, because I don't. Like, Seattle sports are better with him in Seattle, and this team is better with him in Seattle. I just am genuinely so curious to see what he would look like in an offense, a very offense forward team, just to see if he's even reached his ceiling.
I agree. This is excellent. I think one of the good things that you take away from your responses now is just understanding how good y'all had it for the last 10, 11 years.
Sorry,
like,
guys.
it's been I know. Look, I'm young. You know what I'm saying? I'm a young guy, but I haven't seen no winning in Washington yet. But hopefully we get Russ and we can go from there. So I guess the last thing that I will ask you, and this one will be quick because I appreciate your time. You have been here longer than we anticipated, so I appreciate you hanging out with us. Just the trade conversation. What do you think it just takes for Washington to pull off a trade for Russell Wilson?
Oh, multiple firsts for sure. And important to know, I heard like a segment on a DC sports radio this morning saying he doesn't have a no trade clause. He does. So Russell Wilson, he does have a no trade clause. Okay. So he would have to approve the trade. So I'm going to add a quick correction to that.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. I'm putting that out later tonight then.
Yeah. So,
I'm glad you said that.
So he'd have to approve the trade, waive the clause or whatever it is. And I think multiple firsts. I mean, I feel like the local conversation, when people aren't complaining, again, I've had texts being like, could Seattle still get a first round pick? And I'm like, listen to sports radio from any other city. Yes. I think, man, 2 firsts at least, I would think, and then go from there. But I would think that's the starting point. And anything less than that is just ridiculous.
Right,
man, I think Seattle could get 3 firsts and a second round pick from this year's draft. Like, I mean, if you look at the draft class this year, like, nobody really is like excited about any of the prospects. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that they may not do good in their career, but no one's excited about it. Next year, you can be a little bit more excited. You got C.J. Stroud coming out of Ohio State more than likely. Bryce Young out of Alabama, things of that nature. But, like I said, just outside looking in, Seattle needs – I guess the bad part about getting more draft capital is, are you going to pick the right players? And they haven't picked the right players. So it's like you could have an abundance of picks, but if you aren't picking the right guys, it doesn't mean shit. I'll just say it like that. It doesn't mean anything at all. But what is your likelihood of Russell being traded in general. Let's not even say Washington Commanders, but
Yeah.
just in general, do you feel like the likelihood of him being in Seattle for the 2022 season is realistic, or what?
I'm still getting used to the Washington Commanders.
Same
I
here.
was like 80% sure he'd be traded like 4 months ago, or maybe midway through the season. I was like, this is it. This is the last year seeing Russell Wilson in Seattle. I think that the way that they finished the season, two things. One, the way they finished the season, which was very strong on offense. And maybe there's this feeling of like, we can run it back. And what does Shane Waldron's offense look like in year two? Can Russell Wilson have more of a say? The other thing that changed my mind about it a little is Russell Wilson. This is my interpretation of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is someone who very much, I think, cares about being liked. And I think that he understands. I would wager he was surprised by the criticism he got after his comments to Dan Patrick. And I think that it does actually matter to him being able to finish your career with one team and being someone that matters to one team, because I do think he cares deeply about whether or not people like him, in my opinion. And so I think that those two factors considered, I've now flipped a little bit where I'm more like 80% staying as opposed to being traded.
Stacy, you've been great. Once again, I appreciate all this information. I appreciate you hanging in and chopping it up with us. Talk a little Russell Wilson and Seattle Seahawks situation.
Whole hard in the trenches. Ask a nigga what he benching. Triple digits, nigga. Don't forget to mention. Whole hard in the trenches. Ask a nigga.